I'm Bill Winslow, and
I'm Gay Winslow.
that's right. And we live in Rock Hill, South Carolina.
And we're originally from Indiana.
Right. Frankfort, and you're from Elwood,
Right.
where we were born.
That's right.
There.
That's right.
Not together.
Okay.
And we have two children. One is a colonel in the Army in San Antonio, Texas, and Matthew is a broker and financial advisor for many companies and works with Chase Manhattan, or not Chase Manhattan, but
Goldman Sachs.
Goldman Sachs. Okay.
And we have 3 grandchildren. Joshua, who just got married,
And
got
Michael.
a master's in electrical engineering.
And
Michael,
Who's he work for?
I don't remember.
Martin Marietta.
Yeah. Michael, who is just graduated with undergrad and is going to...
He was commissioned first.
Was
He
commissioned.
His dad commissioned him.
He's been in ROTC all the way through high school and all the way through college, so he is going into the service, and but he's going to be
Attending Southern Seminary.
yes, Southern Seminary. He wants to eventually get a PhD in Bible and teach in some seminary somewhere. And Rachel is going to be a senior next year, this coming year. And we don't know what she's going to do yet. She's beautiful and talented. So we'll see.
And she just let us know that she needs some money. She's raising money for her band. It happens to be Senator D. O'Connor High School in San Antonio. And she says, I need to raise $500. I got $35 already. I said, okay, we'll be sending you a check when we get back after you call and talk to us.
They all live in San Antonio or Dallas, Texas, and doing well. Matthew's doing well. We're blessed. We're blessed with the family. Hello, family and friends. It is July the 28th, 2023. We are in Kokomo, Indiana, and we're doing this video for you all to know where we came from and what we want you to know about our lives. I was born in Elwood, Indiana, a long time ago. My mother's name was Crystal. My father's name was Garrett. They have both passed away some time ago. My daddy was a farmer. My mother had been married before. Her husband had passed away. He was in the World War I, and he passed away with tuberculosis. She was in California at the time because her family had moved there. And after he passed away, she decided she wanted to come back to Indiana, which she did. My father, and she had no children. She did have a stillborn a little girl. And I will have a sister in heaven one of these days that I've never met. My father, as I said, was an Indiana farmer. And he had lost his wife to rheumatic fever. He had 4 children: Meredith, Claire, Gus, and Rosemary. Those are all your great uncles and aunt. Meredith went off to college and became a doctor. Claire, by the way, he was at IU. Indiana University. Claire went to Purdue University, and he was a farmer too. And he though got an education in economics. Rosemary went to school, but she made a lawyer and got married, and she didn't finish. She didn't need to. And Gus was the baby of the family. He also went to Purdue and got a degree in agriculture. But before that all happened, Daddy raised these children by himself, without a mother. And I'm sure it was very hard for him. But my mother, as I said, came back after her husband died, came back to Indiana, and she was working in a 5 and dime store. Daddy went into the dime store one day, and he still said that he'd met $1 million baby in a 5 and 10 cent store. Now, you probably don't know that that's a song, but it is. Let's see. Well, let me tell you about me then. Like I said, I was born in Indiana, named Gay. What else can I tell you about me? Lots of things, I guess. I had wonderful parents. I went through grade school in Goldsmith, Indiana. I went then into high school, Jefferson High School in Kempton, Indiana. I loved being on the farm. I think people miss out a lot of things if they aren't on the farm with the animals and with the ground and with the land, and it's just a wonderful way to live. We lived right in Kempton, but our farm was right across the road, so we had it good both ways. We could walk to the post office and to the grocery store and so forth, and the town was, 300 people after all. So anyway, I came home from the hospital to Kempton, Indiana. At that time, Daddy had already gone into college, and that was in the 1800s, so he was, one of those forerunners who farmed and still did other things. He also ran for Congress in Indiana and won, so he was in the Congress in Indiana for a couple of years. He also taught school after he got out of, I believe they called it Normal. That was the college. And so he did have enough college education that he could teach school, which he did. And as the boys grew up, he had a dairy. They drove the horse and the wagon right around Kempton and delivered milk. He had polled Herefords and had a nice farm. It was just a good life for them, except they had lost their mother. But it's a good life. And all the boys really liked the farm. Gus took it over when Daddy became postmaster in our little town. And so Gus, basically, the youngest boy, took over the farm. So in the meantime, all this, I'm in high school. It was a small high school. We had maybe 30 kids in our class. And that was all right too. We were a tight-knit group. Small town living is really not a bad idea. We had a good time. And I cheerleaded for a while. I played the piano for the glee club. I was the treasurer of one of our classes. I think it was treasurer. What else did I do? Now that's enough. Anyway, we had square dances in those days, and we took dancing lessons, the boys and the girls. so that when the prom time came, we could dance, have a good time, and we did. I graduated from Jefferson High School and went off to Ball State Teachers College at that time. I went there because I had fallen in love with this young man who had moved to Kempton when he was a freshman in high school and I was a 7th grader. And his sister, Marilyn, was a friend of mine. Well, so when we got through high school and so forth, I decided to go to Ball State because he was there. Well, I didn't like Ball State. And I wanted to be a dental hygienist anyway from the beginning. So that was an IU, an Indiana University program. So I got into the dental hygiene class after my first year at Ball State. They took 30 girls a year. And thankfully I was one of them because that was really what I wanted to do. It was a tight-knit group of 30 girls, which was better for me than being in a huge university, by myself and so forth. So we really helped each other and got through it all. It was not an easy course, but hygiene was something that I figured that I'd be able to do on my own time. I could, if I said I wanted to only work 2 days a week, I could. And when I started a family, then I could leave and come back and come and go as I pleased, pretty much. My grandfather lived with us when I was little, and so he was part of my life, not for very long. He was up into his 80s, and Gus, the younger brother, was in the house too. So we had a house full of people. I'm backing up a little bit here. My mother then came down with tuberculosis, which obviously she had caught from her first husband, and so she would have to go into a hospital every so often because it would get to her and so forth. And so I would have to go. Well, the first time Mother broke down, so that's what they called it, you break down. So I went with my sister, Rosemary, and she kept me for that many months while Mother was in the hospital. So Mother got, settled again, and so we were all home together. Grandfather, Gus, me, Mother, Daddy. All 5 of us in a house that really couldn't hold all those people. But anyway, so it wasn't too long after that Mother broke down again. So I got pushed off on Marge and Morris. And so they took care of me for that while. And I don't think Daddy didn't feel like he could take care of a baby all by himself. And so anyway, later on, I was in the 2nd grade, I think. I believe that's right. And the doctor said, okay, you need to go to Florida and be in that kind of weather. Okay, so our daddy took us down, and we stayed there for several months. And he would come down, after he got the crops in and so forth. And I believe that was, then she came back to Tipton and went into a private home, and so at least I could go to the window and say hi. Finally, she licked it, and so the rest of my high school years and college years and so forth, she was with me. Daddy also was a county councilman. He was a trustee at school. He was an active person, and he was a man that everybody loved. He was just, when he shook his hand, with another man, and he said, I'll do whatever I can do to help you, just let me know. And he meant it. So only a handshake, and that's all it took. I grew up in Kempton Methodist Church, and somewhere along the way, our Sunday school teacher she had a party for us at her house. Her name was Gladys. And she put us around this table, and she said, now, all of you need to pray this prayer and ask Jesus to come into your heart. So we did. And at that time, we were probably too young to understand all that, but I think God seals you at that time. And then when, on later in life, I realized what it meant and was baptized, dunked. I'm going to back up a little bit to part of my childhood. Like I said, living on the farm was just great. We had sheep, we had hogs, we had cattle, and I had a pony when I was 6, 7. His name was Topper. As I got older, I got a horse. Her name was Penny. And I could get on that horse and run through those fields and hair blowing, and it's a life everybody ought to get, you know. We played in the haymow. Friends down the road, it'd be 110 degrees in that haymow, but we were playing and swinging on the ropes and having a good time. We always had that dog. And I could go through and name them all because we've had them, we still have dogs. But they usually, unfortunately, didn't last too long because they would run on the farm with the men and then, a car would hit them or something. That's not a nice thing, but that's what happened. But we always had cats. Cats, fed the cats, and Daddy always said, Chris, if you would quit feeding those cats, they would go down to the barn and catch mice. Well, Mother felt sorry for them, and so we'd get a litter of kittens in the drawer outside on the back porch. But with the animals and all the things that go with watching the crops grow and just watching God's creation was the way to grow up, and I was happy.
Well, I was born in Frankfort, Indiana in 1940, and that dates me. So if I happen to start not remembering stuff, forgive me. But anyway, born in Frankfort, Indiana, grew up there, and I always remember the years, about 4 or 5 years later, World War II was underway, and we lived on a farm down near Ladoga, south of Crawfordsville, Indiana. And I remember about 5 years old going out with my dad on the farm, and during the war we had to make sure that we didn't waste anything. We were tearing the fences down for the metal, take them to the plant to have them melted down for the war effort. And then my first grade of school was in Barnard. It was a one-room schoolhouse, and I was about 6. And then my sister, Marilyn, was born in 43. And as we grew, I always remember that Barnard was a one-room schoolhouse, but there were 5 grades. Maybe 2 or 3 in the first grade, 3 or 4 in the 4th, 5th, 6th, but it was a very well-run school, and we learned all the basics of what any small kid should start learning. But I always remember one day that our teacher, Miss Featherston, she came in and starting the class, and she would work on the first grade and then go to the second. But then somebody came to the door, and asked for Mrs. Featherston to come over. And for a little boy or a little girl, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, she started crying. And what had happened was that her husband, who drove a gasoline and oil truck for heating different people in the area, well, he got killed and the truck hit a bridge. He's dead. But that was one thing that I always remembered, that it was a very, very sad day for all of us. But anyway, I have 2 sisters. Marilyn, she's 3 years younger than mine, and then Betty came along in 1947. And my dad was a Christian man. He'd always make sure that Marilyn and I went to church with him, the Barnard Christian Church. It was a real, real nice experience. Didn't know about what was meant to be a Christian, but he made sure that we were brought to Sunday school during those early years. After that, my dad, about 1947, my young sister Betty, and she was born. And of the 3 of us, I'd have to say Marilyn. She was the most stable, probably the smartest of all 3 of us. And from that point on, we moved to Frankfort, Indiana, where I was born. This is I was probably 9 or 10 years old. Moved to Frankfort. I really liked that town because we learned so much. It was Kiger grade school. Marilyn and I would walk to school, probably 2 miles. And then I became a patrol boy, where I would help little kids across the street. I felt really proud of myself being able to do that, and I have a trophy that tall that I've kept all these number of years. But anyway, after that period of time, my grandmother lived in Sharpsville, and I'd go to Sharpsville, and she'd take me over to the Methodist church. And she was Christian, and she'd make sure that we were in the Sunday school. Sunday morning, those 2 or 3 weeks I stayed with her, and that's where I had my Christian, got somewhat of the Christian knowledge of what, didn't really still know what it meant to know Jesus. And after 4 or 5 years, I learned to, I really liked to play basketball. Played basketball at Kiger grade school. And then that freshman year, my dad said he had a job. He was going to be starting a big meat processing plant and freezer, and it'd be in Beechwood, Indiana, which is west of Tipton, Indiana, between Tipton and Kempton. So we moved there, and I learned. I'll tell you one episode where my dad taught me how to butcher hogs and beef and even chickens. But he said, son, you're going to learn that whenever you do a job, you try to do it very carefully and do it right the first time. Because if you don't and you get in a hurry, you're going to know what happened. So he said, I want you to go back and help White. He was the foreman on the kill floor, they call it. He said, you put your apron on and go learn how to gut hog. I didn't want to do that. I shouldn't have to do that. My dad's the owner. He said, you go learn. So what happened was I got real impatient. So I grabbed the knife and boom, I cut the gut, and I was spitting stuff. And I knew what my dad said, when you do it right, you do it carefully and do it right the first time. I knew exactly what I meant. So I tried to make sure I try to follow that concept of any kind of job. And from there, my grandfather, my grandmother's name was Estella, but she raised raised my father and his other brother, because my grandfather, he was a farmer up near Kokomo in the country near, I believe it was Alto or Oakford, someplace out there back in those years. But he was sitting on the front porch one time, and just got in from the field, and the storms came up, and lightning struck. Lightning struck him. And it really just evidently affected his brain and all. He ended up in a institution, and my grandmother was by herself. And that was another part of my life of growing up, of being able to face those types of disasters, I guess, or it was really hard for me. But my grandmother came through, and she had a very strong spirit. And as we were growing up there around Beechwood, Jefferson Township, and Tipton County, they always had this big festival. I just loved it. Like, they call it the Old Settlers in Goldsmith, Indiana. And we always enjoyed it. As a freshman, we went over there to it first year, being there in Tipton County at the farm country. They had this festival. They had a carnival, and I was excited about it. I was able to go that night with some other friends, and we were walking around having a good time. It had just rained, been pouring the whole ground. The ground around was so muddy, terribly muddy. And I wasn't paying attention to what was going on. I happened to walk in. Here comes the octopus, the old octopus carnival ride. And I walked in between the little gate, not paying attention. That octopus hit me, picked me up, and it made me slide through the mud over, and I caught myself. But wasn't hurt, but I was just really, really surprised when you have something like that. But anyway, I've tried to pay attention to what I was doing as much as I could. But anyway, that was a big surprise for me. And I played basketball in high school, and I met a young lady that she's from Kempton, and her name was Gay Gossard. And we became real close friends. And after college, what I really enjoyed about the high school was we had these square dances. Man, they were so much fun. And go on and on to my mom and my dad. They always were very hardworking people. And my dad, to back up a little bit, he grew up in Kempton also. He graduated from Kempton. They were called the Kempton Ponies in 1932. And he met my mom. I don't know exactly where they met, but my dad and his sister married, and Wesley, they taught in high school there at Kempton. And finally, my dad graduated in 32, and Wesley and my Aunt Mary suggested maybe he ought to go. He went to Purdue Butler with Wesley for a semester. Didn't have enough money to carry him through, but anyway, he was very smart. My dad was really very, very smart, and to this day, I remember of what he has done for me, introducing me to church and the Bible. He always tried to make sure that Marilyn and I, were in church. And during the time of growing up there in Kempton, an evangelist came. His name was Tony Fontaine. And this was 1957, I believe. He came to do a revival. And what Tony Fontaine had been, what he'd been through, he was a singer that was promoted by the mob in Las Vegas. But he got out of it. They let him get out of the mob, but they helped build him up in his singing. But he could really, beautiful singer, but a fantastic evangelist. And that date, 1957, I was going to be 17 in 2 weeks, because 7's a perfect number. But anyway, I accepted Jesus Christ as my Savior at that evangelistic service in Kempton Methodist Church. And the date always remembered me. And I still am trying to grow in the Spirit of Jesus Christ. And after accepting that, I've tried to learn more and more. But backslide, go to college, didn't really follow Jesus that closely. But then after getting married, which was in 1966. But before that, I was going to school at Ball State and then at IU and working and going to college. Then I wasn't taking enough hours, so I got drafted. And so from that point on, excuse me a second, 1965, that's when Vietnam, they were really building up over there. And so we were drafted. They sent me to Fort Knox, did all the boot camp, and having background 3 years of financial endeavors and college and accounting and that type of thing. The Army made an aircraft mechanic out of me, sent me down to Fort Rucker, Alabama. So I became an aircraft mechanic. After a year there, I'd come home on leave, and Gay was there. We'd seen each other back and forth. She'd already graduated, she was working, but anyway, that brings us up to the days in the Army. We got married April 17th, 1966, and took a honeymoon back to Fort Rucker, Alabama, where we stayed there. And but one other real humorous thing happened to me is when I was in the Army, before we got married, waiting orders. I knew I was going to go to Vietnam, kept waiting orders. But a quartermaster sergeant came over and said, I need 4 volunteers. We were tired of waiting. We wanted something new. He said, I got something new and different from you for you to do today. Go get in the bus. Hey, Sarge, where are we going? You find out when we get there. Bottom line was we went through the whole thing, and I will never ever volunteer. I realized I'm not going to volunteer again for anything, because where he took us, went down to quartermaster, we got big heavy boots, rubber boots, heavy gloves, and we had big heavy masks and gunny sacks, big burlap bags, and some number 9 wire with prongs on the end and flashlights. Hey, Sarge, where are we going? As you find out, we're about there. What you got to do, all these barracks had not been used since the Korean War. What you got to do, get all those rattlesnakes out of those nests under there. I said, what, Sergeant? You heard what I said. You got to shine that light in their eyes and they will become hypnotized. You grab them, put them in a bag. Grab them, put them in a bag. We did that for 2 days. And that's the last time we took them all over to Opp, Alabama, where they had the big rattlesnake rodeo every year. They still have it today, the rattlesnake rodeo. And the first prize is $200. The longest snake you catch, you get $200. And what they do with that, they milk them for the venom, and then they deep fry them. They butcher them and deep fry them. But, so to speak, that was the last time I volunteered for anything I didn't know anything about. But basically, that's just about all brings us up to about 1966. Got married, got out of the Army, we moved back, and started working at Union Carbide, Lindy Division, Speedway, Indiana, and worked there for 2 or 3 years. A good friend of ours, Sam Thorpe, who'd worked there, and he says, hey, they need an accountant. Would you be interested? So I just got out, started to look for a job, but it just happened, boom, I got one. I answered a prayer. And so I worked with Union Carbide there, and they came to me one day and said, hey, we know that you have been out to California seeing your wife's aunt. Would you want to transfer to a Union Carbide plant in Ontario, California? I said, huh? Surprised me. And I said, when they told me more about it, and we decided, okay, we're going to move to Southern California. I had not ever been to west of the Mississippi, and this is a bold move away from family in Indiana. And again, I said, yeah, let's go. Drew was 1 year old, and we moved to Altaloma, California, and worked at the Union Carbide Lindy Division gas plant, where they make oxygen, nitrogen, argon, pull it right out of the air. But that's where I worked there. Then Union Carbide decided they're going to regionalize everything. Asked me to be assistant region manager in San Francisco. hadn't been to San Francisco. Well, any bottom line was we moved to Danville. We lived in Danville, Indiana, so we moved to Danville, California. And Drew was about 2 years old, and but that was a beautiful home, beautiful, the San Ramon Valley was really nice. It was nice duty, very good duty. Then they asked me later on, they said, well, we have a job for you. We'd like for you to take the managership in Chicago region. And some of the places my job was to go out and implement and interview people for the accounting in all these 30 different plants. I always remember one where I told Gay, I said, I've got to go to Butte, Montana. He said, why? He said, well, the plant manager there needs some help as far as training his accounting people there at that plant in Butte. That's okay, so I go there. And the first thing Mr. Thorpe wanted to show me was one of the highlights of being in Butte, Montana. He said, I got to show you the world's deepest hole. I said, what? He said, come on over. He got in the car, went to this big hole. He said, this is the world's deepest hole there. Do you want to go down in there 100 feet? I said, no, I don't want to do that. But what it was, Butte, Montana got its name because it had a big smelting plant there. They processed copper, and all this steam and smoke would come out of the smelting plants and just it burned off everything around it. So it looked like it was just completely bald, that whole area, and that's why it became the name of Butte. But the big thing to see there is that biggest hole in the earth. Deep hole, but back to we were in Chicago and got that all set up and everything, and then we finally got asked to go to be divisional controller for Lindy Division of Union Carbide. Moved to Tarrytown, New York, lived in Danbury, Connecticut. And by this time, Matthew was born in Chicago in 1973. Drew had been born in Danville, Indiana, and they were growing, and we moved from Chicago to Connecticut, and Matthew was just about 6 months old. So we lived in Danbury, Connecticut, and we just moved all over the country. Gay and I totaled up about 18 different places we'd moved since the Army. But we saw the United States on the Union Carbide tab, and had a number of different homes. And so, and also we've had a lot of pets. We have one now, his named Baxter, the best little dog anybody would want to have. I did, just to back up once, trying to get through school. I always remembered Kokomo, worked at Delco Radio, and I really had it going well. I worked at Haynes Stellite from 11 to 7. Then at 7:30, I'd go over to Delco to 3:30. Did that for a month. Man, that money was good. I didn't have time to spend it, but the money was really good. Ball State, one of the little, I always like to have a little bit of humor. And I always remember this. Laughter is God's hand on the shoulder of a troubled world. I mean that. I'll tell you that I had this folk dancing class. I was going to get it's a 5-hour A, so this is going to be great. I'll be able to get this. And there's a lot of laughter in that class. I was trying to learn different countries' folk dances, but this one was the lady that was teaching us. She was a German lady, very tough, very sturdy, very forceful. When she teaches, she said, Mr. Winslows, you will learn how to dance the troika. It's a Russian dance. I said, I am? Yes, you will. And she said, I will show you. She swung me around that dance floor like I was a rag doll. And said, you will also learn how to call a square dance. Everybody's laughing their buns off. But she took me out there, and I did learn how to do the troika and learn how to dance, just a little bit of humor. But she was really a tough dancer. I worked my buns off. I got a C in that class, and that irritated me. But that point on, I'd get to see Gay once in a while when she was at IU. And I think Drew was born in 1969, and he's now 53. That's really dating me now. And then Matthew, he's traveled all over the world. He likes to travel, and he was with he has a friend, and she was with him in IU, at IU Music School. They both went to the Sarasota Opera. And Matthew is also, he decided he went to New York City to see his friends after they graduated, and he's going to make it big in the opera. And he's met his friend in New York City and found out that one was delivering pizza and the other was working at the Museum of Modern Art. And Matthew decided, nope, I'm not going to be a starving artist. He got a real job, and he was a big stockbroker for not Merrill Lynch, but one of the big stock companies. And now he is working with and advising companies how to invest their money and how the employees should invest their money. He's got a very responsible job, and he's pretty sharp, pretty in tune with the people, knows how to talk with them, how to suggest what they should be doing. He's a good manager. And that's just about all. Let me see, one other thing. We were last place, Danbury, Connecticut. Then Union Carbide transferred us around. And we ended up in Fort Mill, South Carolina with Union Carbide. And then 93, we were downsized, and I accepted early retirement. Ended up in Ladies Island, South Carolina, one of the barrier islands. Beautiful, loved it. And then we decided we better get closer to Matthew, who lives in Charlotte. We live in Fort Mill, because he has told us he does not want us to live with him, but he said, you move on up here, I have a home for you. I'll take care of you. One other thing I forgot to mention, it's a kicker. I was at Fort Knox going through boot camp. I hadn't talked to Gabe very often because she had dumped me. Early on, she was at IU and I was in the Army, but she didn't do it didn't mean, but she was doing her own thing, I was doing mine. But anyway, I was on guard duty at Fort Knox, walking my post, and I went in for a 5-minute break, and Sergeant Jones says, hey, we got a call. See, how did it go? Oh, I was going to call Gay to see how she's doing back in Indianapolis. So I get the phone, I call her, and her roommate, I think it was Leslie, said, no, Gay's down at Fort Knox. Oh, she is? What's she doing down there? Oh, she decided to go down to see you. Oh, I didn't know what she was doing, didn't see her. Anyway, I went back to my post and walked my post. And the bottom line was, she had come down to see me, but I was on guard duty for 24 hours, so she didn't want to get that changed. She said, well, he couldn't get off of that. So anyway, some other young man was there in the quartermaster office, and so he took her for a date. Okay. But anyway, that's what you call getting a double whammy. I forgot to mention one of my favorite verses that makes me really tear up or become like a mop. And that is when Jesus is traveling around through Capernaum and all the different areas. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, because there's so many people out there that are in need. And I could see that when Jesus was traveling through Capernaum, he looked down and he saw all these people. They were sick, they were hungry, they were downtrodden, they were sheep without They were sheep without a shepherd. And I could just see Jesus looking down upon them, and he probably cried. But he healed a lot of the illnesses. But that's in Matthew 9:35 through 38. And I always remember that as one of my guiding scriptures. And I just forgot to mention that earlier. But that is one that really hurts. When you see all the people out there hurting today, you just can't be able to help them all somehow, some way. But
Bill and I met each other when he moved. I lived in Kempton all my life, through high school. He came from Frankfurt and was a freshman in high school. I was in the 7th grade. And I suppose in a couple, 3 years, we decided we were boyfriend and girlfriend. And so that's the way we met. The first time he kissed me was, do you remember?
Well, it was a pastor's station wagon, right?
No.
No? I don't remember.
It was on a hayride.
Huh.
It was the pastor. It was at Morris and Marge's farm, and it was a hayride, and we were on the hayride. And you were probably a senior, and I was a sophomore, maybe, I don't know. Something like that. But that's how we met. From then on, he went off to college. I went off to college. And we kind of drifted apart for a while because we were, physically apart. And
She dumped me.
Anyway, when we were all through with those kinds of things, he got drafted. We went to Fort Rucker, Alabama, or he did. I came after the year first year was over because I knew he wasn't going to go to Vietnam. The war was almost over. So we got married. And we both then were at Fort Rucker. You take
She had as we were there, she was looking for employment. She was a dental hygienist, and she could probably have gotten a job, but she became the treasurer of this big corporation, construction company. Doing really well. She handled all the books. She did a little bit of everything. But then she kept wondering, what is going on? She keeps getting calls from creditors, like the construction people. The owner hadn't been paying his bills for all this lumber. And I guess you talked to your father about that, and he said for you to bail out of it quickly, because she was the treasurer of this company that was run by the husband and the wife. And I think they'd been in North Dakota and moved to Alabama to make a fortune, but they didn't. But
so all of a sudden they were gone.
They were gone.
Yeah, that was okay.
Yeah.
You made a lot of good friends while we were in Alabama. They were all in the same boat that we were. No money.
Yeah.
When it came to the end of the month and we had no money, we could go down. We could go down to the filling station in Enterprise, Alabama, which is where we lived, and have our credit card used for.
One credit card.
Yeah, we had one credit card. It was a gas credit card, but that's okay. It was a gas station.
Yeah, we were able to get some payday or
peanut butter crackers.
Yeah.
We lived on peanut butter crackers for a couple of days.
But when people would come to see us, we took them to this big peanut butter plant right behind us, because that whole area where we lived in, it smelled like peanut butter the whole time. Yeah. We took them and took a tour of what was the name of that?
I don't remember.
It was Sessions Peanut.
Yeah.
Sessions Peanut Butter Company. And Enterprise was the home of the boll weevil monument. The boll weevil made everybody diversify, because the boll weevils came in and destroyed their cotton crop. So they diversified and started raising peanuts. Then we got out, we went back to Kempton.
My parents at that point had gone to California for the winter. So the house was empty. So that was nice. We could move in there because neither one of us had a job. And so we both got jobs pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And I worked for a dentist in Speedway,
Zoliak?
Guliak. And he got a job at Union Carbide, Lindy, there in Speedway.
Friend of ours, Sam Thorpe, said, hey, you're on a job. He was working there, so I was able to get the cost accounting job. So it worked out pretty well.
Yeah, and so we were there for, how long were you there?
3 or 4 years. We started in 67. Okay. We got transferred 70.
Well, in the meantime, though, we had our first baby.
Yeah, Drew.
Mm-hmm. Had Drew, and he was a year old when he got transferred. He said, "You're going to California." So we lived in
Danville, Altaloma, right north of Cucamonga.
Mm-hmm.
That was an experience that first year, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. The first time, we weren't there even a week, and we're in bed, and the whole house shakes. And I said, Bill, we're having an earthquake. And he said, oh no, it's probably the wind or something. I said, no, we're having an earthquake. And that was scary. Indiana didn't have earthquakes. And so, as I said, Drew was a year old. We were only there for 9 months. This was in the Los Angeles area. And
Route 66 was right north of us.
Yeah. And I had 2 aunts out there, which my parents had both passed away before our children were born. So that was tough. But we were in California, and both of my aunts, of my mother's sisters, were there. So they just kind of turned into grandmothers, and that was a help. That was really a help. We were there for 9 months. I stayed behind to sell the house, and Bill went on down to the San Francisco area. That's where he got to go next.
But before we left there, we got a baptism under fire. When you're talking about earthquake, she had an earthquake. Later on that fall, I was at work down in Fontana, down farther in the valley. And Kate said, you better come home. I said, why? She said, well, there's a forest fire right above us. San Bernardino Mountains across there, from San Bernardino clear over to West Covina. And it was there, people bringing their horses and cattle out of the mountainous areas down past us where we lived in Altaloma. And it was burning, the ashes you could see, but you know, you had the garden hose out ready to water down everything, but it was quite an experience of Southern California.
It was. We were the next neighborhood to be evacuated with all the horses and cows and everything coming down the street, and we were next. And but it stopped before it got to us, and everybody was on their roofs, spraying them down.
Another little tidbit that happened to us: we had this 65 Volkswagen bus. I loved it, and we drove one car out, and the company paid to transfer all of our moving expenses were handled by Union Carbide. So they shipped the bus out. I kept wondering, where's this bus? We had already been in the house. We got in there in the latter part of August, and the bus hadn't got there. Finally, I called, I think it was like September the 10th, about 8 weeks later. At 10 o'clock one night, here comes somebody knocking on the door. Hey, I got your bus. I said, okay, here, it's just signed right here. So, well, let me go take a look at it. I went out there and looked at that bus, and it looked like it had been in one of those carnival shows where you pay 50 cents to beat up the fenders off of this car. It was banged up on both sides and the back. And what had happened, they were going through an underpass in New Mexico, Gallup, New Mexico, I think that's what he said. And the chains came loose on it, and it was banging back and forth inside. But anyway, things like that happen when people move, but they went back and fixed it up just like new.
So we get into our house in northern California. Danville. And he commuted into San Francisco every day over the Oakland Bay Bridge, right? Well, that kind of made me nervous because of the earthquakes, and actually several years later that thing collapsed. And anyway, he wasn't on it. We had already been moved by that time. We were only in San Francisco for how many months?
It was about a year and a half.
Maybe a year and a half. Total, year and a half in California.
70.
Moved us to Chicago in December. Cold, snow, heater, the furnace kept blowing out.
Northwest winds kept blowing out the pilot light on the furnace.
Kept blowing out. So we stayed in
Until 74. Wheaton, Illinois.
Wheaton. And Matthew, our second, was born there. How long did we stay there?
Yeah, 74. 71 to 74. Moved to Danbury, Connecticut, right?
Moved to Connecticut, Danbury, and Bill commuted into New York. And we got to love Connecticut.
Beautiful.
It's a beautiful country. We had good friends. We helped build a church there, and
Danbury.
And really, I really hated that move. I didn't want to move because we stayed there 10 years, and the kids grew up there, and they weren't happy about moving. But we said, "You want to eat? We're going to move."
Well, before that took place, I was commuting into New York City. Took 2 hours and a half on a train from Danbury. 6:05, get there at 8:30. One Friday, though, you don't miss the commute, but one Friday got done early in the meeting at 270 Park Avenue. Got on the train at Grand Central, heading home. Got the 125th Street tunnel. The train broke. The conductor said, "Hey, we're on to get off because the train is not going anywhere. Something happened to it." So we had to walk about a mile and a half out of the tunnel, and it was during one of the many, many strikes they have in New York City. The garbage strike was on, so we walked out of there. It was about the same type of weather we're having right now, 85, 90 degrees. But it was fun. We made it out to the bus, and they took us all the way back to Danbury. But anyway, those types of things happened down in New York City, in that area. And then,
so after 10 years of being there, we moved back to Indiana, lived in Avon, and Bill was shutting down the Speedway plant. So
this is after Bhopal, if you know what Bhopal was.
And so Drew graduated from Avon High School. Matthew was not happy. He was young. He was only in the 6th grade when we moved. And he liked Connecticut, and he was not crazy about coming to Indiana. So anyway, so Drew went off to Ball State there. And
he loved it.
We took in
Ollie Novell.
No.
He was a exchange student from Chile.
Yeah.
Nio. His name is Nio.
Yeah. So I said, he really, we had some problems with him, and so it kind of gave me a good out to say, we're going to be moving, and you need to get settled somewhere else, and blah, blah, blah.
He loved Pink Floyd.
Oh, yeah.
That's all Dad sent him up from Chile to buy Pink Floyd records.
Well, CDs, and then
CDs.
He'd go down and sell them down there. I mean, he really wasn't there to study. But that's neither here nor there. So anyway.
Gabe was a very kind person, fantastic, a hostess. We were going back to Connecticut to visit friends, and She said, we better take Niall. He probably would really enjoy seeing the Statue of Liberty in New York City. So we did. We took Niall with us back there. And Matthew was in the back. He always called him what? Niall. Well, whatever it was. But they got along all right. But here Niall was, I don't think he even looked at the Statue of Liberty once. He was busy listening to his tapes. And I kept telling Gacy, we drove all the way out of here. And here he is. Here's the Statue of Liberty. He's listening to Pink Floyd's.
Well, anyway, it was an experience.
And his dad was very wealthy.
And speaking of, complaining about me being so good, finally I sat down with him and I said, Niall, who kept your room clean and so forth when you're at home in Chile? And he said, the maid. I said, well, I'm not your maid. It's time. You got busy here. I want the place cleaned up. But anyway, so Matthew and I went down over spring break and saw these beautiful pink blossoms all over South Carolina, and they were peach trees. And so I looked for a house down there where you were still at Speedway.
Yeah.
And so Matthew got in school there and graduated from Fort Mill High School.
One of the best schools in South Carolina. And then he got a full ride scholarship, right?
At IU.
IU Music School.
Yeah. Well, it was the most. It was the most they gave. It was total. So, what did we do next?
Well, no,
we were in Fort Mill, and
he was at IU Bloomington.
Right. We got transferred again.
Not yet. We went up to see Matthew, and he was in a couple shows at IU.
Matthew is an opera singer.
Yeah, opera singer. He ended up having a part at the Louisville Opera, so we happened to be there to see him with some other friends and stuff. And here Matthew was ready to go on stage and sing. Looked down, and he had white socks on. He had a tuxedo type and white socks. That didn't go for Matthew. You can't do that. You can't walk in there with white socks on.
Just take them off.
Take them off.
That would be better than white socks.
I'm not doing that, Mom. I said, Matthew, let me go see if I can help you out. So I go into the bowels of that opera theater in Louisville, and I saw a guy. I said, say, can you help me? I'm looking for a pair of black socks. He said, well, come over here to this room. There's a whole big tub of clothing and stuff. So I dug down in there, and I ended up finding, they probably weren't mates, but they're black. So I was able to get those out, but he did all right.
Yeah, he did. So in the meantime, Drew had gone to Ball State and graduated from Ball State in
Physiology.
Well,
right?
Yeah.
His medical background.
Yeah. Anyway, and so he decided that he was going to go to Florida for his master's, which he did. And we were, like I said, we were in Fort Mill when Matthew graduated. And we got transferred back to Kentucky.
Evansville, Indiana. Well,
yeah.
Anyway.
His office was in Kentucky. And we decided that we were going to live across the river because we could get lower tuition. We were paying out of state tuition from Matthew. And Drew was working on his master's in Florida. Matthew, well, we were there, I don't know. How many years were we in Evansville? We were there for 14 years at least. Yeah. And in the meantime, Matthew had gone to Cleveland with Charles Schwab.
Charles Schwab, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Drew had finished his master's in cardiac rehab. And he was, well, anyway, he met his wife down there, and Rebecca came along, so we had another person in the family, so to speak. And Drew and Rebecca got married.
1993.
Okay.
Yeah,
And-
Merritt Island, that's where she was from. Yeah.
She was Florida girl. And anyway, so that's when the grandchildren started to come. Matthew has never married, and that's why we moved up to Fort Mill or Rock Hill, so we could be close to one of the kids that could put us in a home when we needed to go there.
And Matthew has a home for us picked up.
So anyway, we've had a lot of anniversaries. The boys gave us 50th when we were in Fort Mill. Yes, Fort Mill. And we have now been married 57 years, going on 58. Go ahead.
Think about another place we lived.
Did we miss one?
Well, we lived. No, I don't think we missed any. We start Fort Rucker, Enterprise.
Well, we
Told them
lived
about the rattlesnakes.
Yeah,
Then
we were in.
Speedway.
But wait a minute, we've been through most of those, but I think we might have missed. Oh well.
Georgetown Apartments. Georgetown, we lived in Georgetown Apartments, surrounded by the 500-mile racetrack. Then from there I went to Terra. From Terra to Indian Head Lake. How many through? That's 4 moves. Indian Head Lake, Danville. From there to California, San Ramon to San Francisco, Chicago, Danbury. How many you got? Danbury. Yeah, Wheaton. Danbury. Indianapolis, Fort Mill. Fort Mill to Henderson back to Rock Hill.
Yeah. And in the meantime, Bill retired from Union Carbide and did several things just to keep himself busy.
Out of your hair too, right?
Yes.
Worked at, I give GED tests for the state of Indiana. Worked in there. Workforce development.
So then we moved. When Drew called us from Beaufort and said, we're going to be here. He was with the hospital in Beaufort, and he said, we're going to be here. The grandchildren, come on down. And it took us 5 years to decide if that's what we were going to do, which we finally did. In 2 years, he said, I'm moving.
Yeah.
He'd gone with the military.
Yep.
They
And
called
Drew
him
had
and
called his mother once at 4 a.m. in the morning and said, I'm back. She said, where are you back from? I'm Baghdad. See, he was supposed to be over in charge. He was a major at that time in charge of all the medical equipment going into the Desert Storm troops in Baghdad. Come to find out that it's all been getting into the black market. So he had to start escorting the whole thing into Baghdad.
But now he's a colonel, and he's got another year. And then he's going to be working for Allied Health.
One very interesting thing took place was here Drew was in this unit. He's in Baghdad, and his driver was a young lady. And they had been in Baghdad, got all the medical equipment there. And the way they worked it, the Polish armed forces go first. The Iraqi soldiers and that unit would go first, then come the Polish, then the Americans would get out to the airport real quick. And Drew says to his driver, say, those were really close, weren't they? She said, sir, get in the Jeep now. And finally, he paid attention to her. They got in, they got back out to the airport and got out of there. But he went through quite a few experiences and gave his mother a start many times. But
well, as it turned out, though, this was the funny part of this. It turns out his driver was in Ball State, graduated from Ball State, and she was now an MP in the Army.
happened to ended up being assigned to be his driver.
Yeah, so they both graduated from Ball State, and put a big piece in the Ball State paper,
You got the bricks named whatever, something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
But she was pretty tough because she was one of the big wardens of the New Jersey State prison system. So you paid attention to her, right, Drew? Yep.
Yeah. Well, he said, "Did I hear that? Is that what I think it is?" And she said, "Yes, sir." Getting the nice, quiet, getting the Jeep or whatever they went. And he said, "Really? How close are they?" He said, "Sir, get in the Jeep." And they got out of there.
But see, then he called and he says, "Well, where'd he go?" I said, "Well, I did some sightseeing." He went into Babylon. Driving back down to Kuwait. They drove through Babylon and all that stuff. What are you doing? War zone.
But he's safe.
Yeah.
So we have had lots of years together. And
How many?
57.
Oh, that's pretty good. You
Going on
did
58.
need a medal.
I do. So do you. And they have been, there's some rocky times and some lots of good times, and we have good children, and we are just so thankful. Elvis has a song out, which you don't very often hear, but it's called True Love Travels on a Gravel Road. And that's true. You have gravel, but you work through it and you stay together and love each other.
Yep.
That's
It's
it.
about, we'll bring you more up to date when we figure out what all we missed. Couldn't be too much.
Yeah.
So now I end these with asking you what's one piece of advice that you can give to future generations of your family who might be watching this at a later date?
I'd say prayer. Listen. And don't talk a lot, just listen, right? Listen.
And,
Pray.
Yeah. And be gentle and kind, and sometimes when you've been together this long, it's like, I can say anything I want to you, and that's not good. So try to treat each other like they were people you just met, and that floats better. But we've hung in there. At
Yep.
Drew's wedding, we got the prize because we had been married the longest. And it was dance. DJ came over and said,
Usually you mean Josh's wedding.
I'm sorry.
In San Antonio, just,
Joshua's wedding.
yeah, Josh just got married.
Yeah. And so he comes over and he says to Bill, what keeps you together for all these years? And Bill said really nice things. You be kind to each other and so forth. And they gave me the mic and he said, well, and what about you, Miss Winslow? And I said, just hang in there. That's all I could think of at the time. But you do have to hang in
Yeah.
there.